The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Sam Ray, meteorologist at the National Weather Service in Wakefield. Do our Thursday live briefing here. So really main weather story for today into the, mainly just tomorrow is going to be the continuing breezy conditions along the coast. And that's as it's now post-tropical hurricane Imelda moves further out into the Atlantic. We also have some strong high pressure building north of the area, which kind of is tightening that pressure gradient and keeping those breezy winds. And so with those breezy winds, we expect continued tidal flooding generally through Friday, so through tomorrow. And then also with the stronger winds from the water, it's going to keep the nearshore waves quite elevated. So we do have a high surf advisory for all beaches due to those breaking waves and some minor beach erosion possible. And then, as I mentioned, the tidal flooding, so minor to locally moderate tidal flooding for the currently ongoing high tide cycle, and then potentially for the next couple ones through tomorrow. We do have coastal flood warnings and advisories in effect. Hit the marine stuff towards the end of the presentation, but again, here's current look at Hurricane Imelda. It moved over Bermuda later yesterday as a hurricane, but is now east of the island. And as of the latest 11 a.m. update, the Hurricane Center has dropped the tropical designation from Imelda, and it's now kind of like a post-tropical, non-tropical system. Will still remain rather strong, though, as it cools east of Bermuda, further east of Bermuda, and accelerates northeast and out to sea this weekend. It's early next week. Again, really the main weather story is just kind of with the strong low here and the high pressure north of the area. We have some breezy northeast winds, but again, as what's left of Imelda departs offshore, we'll see diminishing winds tomorrow and especially for the weekend. We will still continue to see some larger swells in the high surf, all the coastal impacts through the weekend. So, with the high surf, we have continuing risk for rip currents. So high risk of rip currents for all our area beaches with near shore breaking waves of 6 to 10 feet. And we expect similar conditions into Friday with waves just a little lower, but still very dangerous out there. So probably a good idea to stay out of the water. For the coastal flood hazards here, we do have coastal flood advisories for most of our, most of the areas adjacent to the Chesapeake Bay and the James, York, Rappahannock rivers. We do have warnings for up near Louisetta along the Potomac up there, and then also advisories for the bay side of the Maryland Eastern Shore up here. So generally expecting inundation around 1 foot, locally up to 2 feet for areas in the warning. And that generally is just leading to some shallow flooding in vulnerable areas. But again, these hazards are in effect through late tonight, tomorrow morning, but probably a good shot that some of these, especially middle and upper bay, will need to be extended for one more cycle through most of tomorrow. Again, we also have a high surf advisory for those large waves near the coast, which could also lead to some beach erosion. So just a broader look at the weather pattern we're expecting next couple of days. So here's that high pressure I was talking about north of the area. Well offshore would be the remnants of Imelda, but with the onshore flow today, it will remain breezy but cooler compared to yesterday. And then as we get into the end of the week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the high pressure builds down into the area. We expect diminishing winds, and then Diminishing winds, dry conditions, pretty much dry conditions through the weekend and into early next week. So we'll have gradually warming temperatures as well as the high kind of starts to shift offshore and we get some southerly flow back into the region. As I mentioned, remaining dry through the weekend into early next week. So really no rain for the foreseeable future. Could have some showers, potentially by later Tuesday into the middle of next week with a cold front, but doesn't look like any significant or heavy precipitation at this time. At least just, current weather conditions. I will just show this. Mostly sunny across the area this morning, but we do have some lower level clouds kind of moving off the ocean into our coastal counties. But again, mostly to partly sunny today, and kind of see the western fringes here of Imelda here parting east of Bermuda. So for temperatures today, again, cooler today, generally in the lower 70s. Similar for tomorrow, perhaps a degree or two warmer, and then kind of becomes noticeably more mild by the weekend into early next week, with a good shot that we get some lower 80s returning for a good portion of the area. In terms of the overnight lows, it was quite chilly this morning. We had a good amount of areas inland in the mid to upper 40s, with some 50s and 60s along the coast, but looks similarly cool tonight into Friday night. But as we do warm up a bit, so our overnight lows also are expected to moderate some as well into the 50s and 60s. And then just looking at our chance of rain through the weekend. So no chance of rain through the weekend, with chance of showers potentially by the middle of next week. So we do have that warming trend, and it looks to continue into next week and perhaps beyond, with above normal temperatures favored, with near normal precipitation chances favored. Again, just taking a look at the tidal flooding conditions out there. Yesterday the primary focus was down here in the lower bay, but that's kind of shifted up into the middle and upper bay with the currently those current high tide cycles. But still expecting perhaps one more cycle of minor flooding down here. Sewell's Point, James, York Rivers, and then we could also see moderate tidal flooding again up near Louisetta with the high tide cycles later today as well. I won't go through all of these tidal graphs, but you generally can see the trend here with the next high tide cycle also being quite high, and then the water levels gradually fall later Friday into the weekend. So and then the levels for the lower bay and the James River will also drop off even faster tomorrow into the weekend. So it should be well below minor in action stage by that time. Shifting gears to the marine side, so we still have pretty dangerous marine conditions for our coastal waters, mainly because the seas remain elevated, well in excess of 9-10 feet. Those higher waves are also spilling into the mouth of Chesapeake Bay, Lower Bay. Just looking at the next couple of days, we see the marine risk gradually drops off with rather benign conditions by by the weekend, and especially Sunday and Monday of next week. Still a little gusty, but not as much as yesterday. But winds, peak wind gusts today, expecting in the around 25, perhaps up to 30 knots on the ocean, and around 20 knots in the Chesapeake Bay. Those winds really only stick around for today, and then by tomorrow we're talking about 10 to 15 knots, and then 5 to 10 knots after that through the early portion of next week. And then again, really the main marine concern are the waves and seas. So even seeing 4 to 5 foot waves at the mouth of the bay still today, but as we get offshore into the ocean, still 8, 9, 10, 11 feet, perhaps even higher for our significant wave heights. And those peak today, and occasional wave heights. We're talking about every 15 to 20 minutes. Expect waves a couple feet higher in the 12 to 16 foot range. And then same thing with the winds. With the waves would be gradually dropping off, but still expecting small craft advisories on the ocean, at least through later Friday into early Saturday. So, and then after that, seas much lower, 3 to 4 feet, and by that time would expect that those small craft advisories would be no longer in effect. So I guess that's all I have, with the tidal flooding situation and all the marine stuff. So I will stop here, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take any.